Neelkanth Mishra, Chief Economist of the Axis Bank, is joining us now. Mr. Mishra, really appreciate your time. We are looking at the economic survey 2023-2024, the highlights of which are here right here with me. With regards to inflation and job, there are what has been said here, the opposition is finding it not convincing. They are of the opinion that there is rising unemployment, rural distress, which has not been addressed in the most coherent manner. The government says that there is an increase in capex, which is leading to employment generation, and has said that let's look at the EPFO data. But that is not the right picture, according to opposition.
Look, we have to first acknowledge that the economy is still about 1 to 1.5 years behind where it would have been if COVID had not happened. So this is what we call the pre-pandemic path, that there was a certain pace of growth and a certain level of output the economy would have reached if the pandemic had not happened. We are about 8 to 9% below that level in FY25 this fiscal year. Now, most economies in the world are actually in the same stage. So the global economy is also about 1.5 years behind the pre-pandemic path, and they are slipping further away. We are actually starting to catch up because we are growing faster than what we were doing pre-pandemic. Now, in an economy where there are 1.2 crore, give or take, people joining the workforce every year, if you are behind the pre-pandemic path, then there is about 1.5 crore extra workers in the economy. So that number is actually shrinking. So I'm surprised that the comment is that unemployment is worsening. It's actually not. It is actually shrinking. But the fact is, because of the aftermath of the lockdowns imposed during the pandemic, the economy is behind, and therefore there is, I think, surplus labor in the economy, which is also bringing down the pricing power for labor. And the only way to solve for that is for making investments which have a much longer impact. Remember that the government's debt to GDP is very high at about 80%. The FRBM Review Committee had recommended 60%. We were at about 71% or so before the pandemic. Because of all the work that had to be done during the pandemic, that number is 80%. So the government does not have the fiscal space to throw money. And therefore, the most prudent way to spend the amount that it has is to spend it on things that have the highest multiplier, in the sense that if you spend it on laying railway lines or building roads, in the first year, as the roads are built, that creates jobs. But once the roads are built, that connects and brings different parts of the economy, that reduces logistics costs, makes India's economy more competitive, and creates a much more sustainable jobs than just distributing the money. So I think the approach taken by the government is very consistent with the constraints that are imposed by the aftermath of the COVID pandemic.
So I want your thought also with regards to what the economic survey has said, on inflation, that core inflation declined to 4 times. But food inflation is a matter of concern because globally it continues to be high, and India has also been impacted because of what is being seen as adverse weather conditions.
Well, absolutely. So if you see the history of food inflation in India, there have been very, very few periods where food inflation has actually come to a very low level. The core inflation being below 4%, in fact, it's analyzing at less than 3%, is also reflecting the concern that I flagged early on, that there is slack in the labor market, and because of that slack, labor does not have pricing power, and therefore most labor-intensive services are actually seeing very low inflation. On the food side, in fact, there is a whole section, there's a box in the economic survey which suggests very practical or gives very practical suggestions on how a farmer-friendly framework needs to be created in order to solve the food inflation problem. And that means that we need to do supply side reforms, we need to reduce the volatility in our policies, where we tend to gravitate toward banning futures, banning exports at the first signs of a price spike. Also, we need to spend very heavily in managing the supply chain. In fact, it is mostly on the perishable side that there is a lot of volatility. So I think the suggestions made in the economic survey seem very pragmatic to me from the perspective of controlling food inflation. And I do agree that food inflation may not come down on a sustainable basis for a while.
Neelkanth Mishra, my last question to you. The economic survey has also highlighted what will be seen as a skilling gap, that 1 in 2 graduates perhaps are unfit for employment because of lack of skills. How can that be addressed? And why is this something that we are coming to know about it only very, very late, that they are unfit for employment only because they do not have the right set of skills?
No, the problem that you highlight is, I think, correct, that I think the quality of skilling, the quality of education, there is a significant scope for improvement. But to say that the skilling gap is widening would be exaggerating things a bit. In fact, if you see the number of, or the percentage of 25-year-olds or 18 to 25-year-olds in India who are either graduates or are in college, that percentage is 4 times what it was 20 years back. So I think it would be wrong to say that the skill gap is widening. But yes, there is a very long distance to cover. In fact, the survey, I note, makes very strong recommendations about lightening the burden of compliance, lightening the burden of licensing, because that is very important, and it says very clearly that the burden falls most heavily on the MSMEs because they are small firms. They don't have the ability, and the cost, the relative cost on them of all this compliance is much higher than it is for larger firms. So bringing these compliance requirements down will be very important for making them more competitive and helping them progress. So, but on the skilling side, I think I totally agree. There's a very, very long way to go for us. We need to get many more students into college. We need to also significantly improve the quality of education. We need to improve the quality of ITIs. We need to get the markets involved in some ways to solve some of these problems.